Wendy here. I'm visiting with you from the Alexandria Museum of Art in Alexandria, Louisiana, where through June 21st, 2025, they are hosting the fabulous exhibition organized by the George Rodrigue Life and Legacy Foundation called The River is the Road, Paintings by George Rodrigue. Now, I've shared about this painting before at other stops, but with each investigation and with questions people ask, new things are revealed, and I recall things that I haven't shared before, and I'm feeling really sentimental about it, so I thought I'd do it again. In the spring of 2013, that would be April of 2013, George and I were driving from our home in New Orleans out to Carmel, California. And on the way, we stopped in Houston so George could get his PET scan. He had been in remission from his cancer for 8 months. And you know, y'all, I said this today on a tour I gave, and I'm reminded of it. There's that phrase, right? After a long battle with cancer. You hear that phrase all the time. I always wince a little bit when I hear that long battle with cancer phrase, because it just didn't feel like that. It just didn't feel like that at all. And I mean, I was right there battling with George, but it felt so fast, really fast. And in some ways it kind of was. So he had 8 months of remission, and we learned on that drive in the spring of 2013 when we stopped in Houston that his cancer had returned. And we decided that we were not going to tell anyone, and that we were going to try to forget about it ourselves while the doctors made a plan, so we would take that precious amount of time, focus on other things, or try. Well, as we continued our drive cross country, we got word that the great country western singer George Jones had died. And my George loved George Jones. And so we were listening to George Jones music, talking about that. In fact, my George used to love to tell this story about the time he met George Jones. It was at a car dealership in Lafayette, Louisiana. And he said he was so excited because there was George Jones waiting for his car to get fixed, just like my George was. He said George Jones was wearing his, trademark faded blue overalls. And he said, kind of baby blue, you know the ones. And he said that George Jones asked my George, "What do you do?" And my George says, "I'm an artist." And George Jones says, "Oh yeah, what do you play?" My George loved that story. Anyway, so we're driving across and listening to George Jones. And on the way, George asked me if I would order him this canvas. And when we get to California, he immediately starts painting this painting. And he painted nonstop for about a week. I mean nonstop, falling asleep in his studio nonstop. And looking back, I think he was afraid that he might not get to finish it. And it was really important to him. So what do we have here? Well, instead of a Cajun person walking out from behind one of George's great oak trees, we have a dog. And instead of glowing bright white, like his Cajun figures did with their spirit from the inside out, or do, the dog is glowing bright blue, almost neon, right? Really strong, not painterly like the rest of this painting. But he's wearing a tie, because in case you haven't figured it out yet, it's not a dog at all, right? This is George. And he is standing on his grave, locked into the land of Louisiana, which helps define him as much as it does all Cajun people. There is a river, a road on this great journey of life, leading back, not to a small, bright horizon, but to a big, golden sky. George's journey has changed. Of course, it's a journey we're all on. There's the next part of the adventure, right? Not so much hope as it is expansive and new. George painted me for many years as Jolie Blonde, means pretty blonde. He said to me when we first became us, he said, Wendy, in you at last I have found my Jolie Blonde. It was so romantic and wonderful. He painted me as her many times. So here is my hat. Jolie Blonde's hat at the base of his grave. And in paying tribute to George Jones and in thinking about his own journey, my George wrote on the back of his canvas the title, He Stopped Loving Her Today. On the night, or I should say the morning, that George finished this painting, we were in California, as I said, and he had come and fallen into bed early in the morning, and I got up. I was working on my book at the time, and went and got my coffee and sat in front of our little fireplace there in Carmel, and I was looking at this painting because he had just finished it and it was wet. And he had immediately hung it there on the wall, wet. And I looked at it for a long time. And I started thinking about my role as George's wife, as his partner. And I started thinking about all women. And maybe women who are married to strong men or famous men. And how that relates to our own identities. And I got the idea to look online for other women who might fit this mold, and I came across an interview with a woman named Martha Gellhorn from, I think it was the 70s, maybe the 80s, the interview. Martha Gellhorn was a war correspondent during World War II, and in fact she was the first Western journalist into Dachau. And the interviewer asked her why he was not permitted to ask her about her ex-husband, Ernest Hemingway. And she said, because I refuse to be a footnote in someone else's life. I thought about that for a long time while looking at this painting. Looking at this painting and thinking about a footnote at the foot of George's grave. And George gets up and he comes in. He asked me what I think. And I said, George, I told him the story I just told you about Martha Gellhorn. I said, I want you to know that I'm really happy being your footnote. And he said to me, Wendy, when are you going to realize who you are? And then he said, the difference with us, Wendy, is that we put our feelings for each other ahead of everything else, even our personal ambitions. George Rodrigue said that. George Rodrigue. And I grabbed my pencil and my journal and I said, say that again. And I wrote it down, which is why I can share it with you. And as I was finishing writing, the stereo was playing in the house. And Stevie Wonder came on. And he started singing his song, For Once in My Life. And my George said, now put down that pencil and let's dance. And we danced together, hard, laughing and happy beneath this painting. and it was our last dance. This painting is one of two that is most spotlighted in the new film Blue, the Life and Art of George Rodrigue. Obviously, there are many paintings in it. It's a wonderful film and covers George's entire career, but there are two that they deep dive into. One is the Iole Dinner, which hangs today at the Ogden Museum of Southern Art. You probably know it. It's the big dinner scene, all the men sitting around the table. And the other is this one of the last paintings that George completed. Come and see the original painting here at the Alexandria Museum of Art through June 21, 2025. And don't miss the film. Streaming nationally starting in June also. Enjoy life, y'all.